Hi, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so very much, and welcome to the continuation of our training program. In this lecture today, we are going to move straight to IPCC, and I know what IPCC means. Okay, so in the nutshell, we have studied the SSP, all right, that is shared socioeconomic pathways, which are encapsulated under AR6, AR number 6, that is assessment report, the IPCC assessment report, all right, which is the document that they develop whenever they have assessed climate change, the risk of climate change on the global economy. Okay, they prepare a document called AR6. So the latest of these documents is AR6. So you had AR1, AR2, AR3, AR4, AR5. So we have AR6. And this lecture is built on AR6, which is the latest assessment report produced by IPCC, Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, a United Nations organization's initiative or body, scientific body that is charged with assessing climate risk. All right, thank you. So just a refresher of the SSPs. So in our last class, we learned that there are 5 SSPs inside AR6. Okay, the AR6 contains 5 SSP: SSP1, SSP2, SSP3, SSP4, and SSP5. So please don't mind the numbering. Okay, just know that we have SSP1, SSP2. So you might be seeing SSP1 here again. Don't mind. Okay, it's just the way that IPCC has coded the document. Okay, so it's a special coding, but we know that there are 5 SSPs. So each SSP stands for a climate plausible future. All right, our plausible futures of the climate, what we anticipate the climate to be like, the global warming, the global average global temperature to be like in the future. That's what we're talking about. Okay, so take note of that. So just to summarize what we have learned and to further consolidate and refresh our memories about these SSPs, that is SSP shared socioeconomic pathways. All right, so the first one, which is SSP1, the major characteristics we need to know is that it is called a green road. It is a sustainable path. It is the path in which the global warming is expected to be at 1.5 degrees at most. So 1.4 to 1.5 degrees Celsius. That is the temperature, the global average temperature under SSP1 is expected to hover around 1.4 degree to 1.5 degree Celsius on the average. Okay, and here we expect that the global inequality, the inequality between developed countries, rich countries, and poor countries will be reduced drastically. Okay, so there will be a reduction in inequality, all right, income distribution between the two countries, between developed countries and underdeveloped or developing countries. Okay, that is another major characteristic you need to remember here. And then another major characteristic of SSP1 you need to remember is that the global warming is going to be low. That what we know. Carbon emission, beg your pardon, emission is going to be low. It's going to be a low emission economic pathway to the future. That's what it means, because there will be adoption, there will be aggressive policies, climate policies that will curtail the use of fossil fuels, and therefore the amount of carbon emissions of greenhouse gases into the atmosphere will be reduced drastically. All right. So number two, SSP number two here we said is the middle of the road. Middle of the road because we are saying that countries will continue to do things as normal. All right. They will continue to use more fossil fuels than electric, all right, fuel or clean energy sources. Therefore, the global warming in this SSP2 will be 1.8. It will rise above 1.5 to 1.8 degree Celsius. That's what we're saying here. So it's like a business as usual. It's going to be business as usual. And in most cases, it's going to be the baseline. We may be using it as the baseline. All right. Please take note. And then SSP3, here we say is middle of the road, middle of the road. It's middle of the road. Emission is high here. Emission will grow high astronomically because there will be no cooperation among nations to curtail global warming. And as a result, the temperature, global average temperature is going to rise to 2.7, up to 2.7, 2.8 degrees Celsius. That's what we are saying here. And then we have the SSP4, SSP4. Please take note, SSP4. So in SSP4, what we anticipate is that there will be regional rivalry, all right? There will be nationalistic movements among nations. Every country will be fighting for their own selfish national interest. Therefore, there will be little or no cooperation on global stage in order to combat climate change. And as a result, there will be more use of carbon fuels. Emissions is going to be high and escalated as well. And the global warming is going to rise. Global average temperatures will rise to the range of 3.6 degrees Celsius. And then we have the last one, which is SSP5. In SSP5, we are anticipating an optimistic view. Number one characteristic of SSP5, we are saying that inequality will reduce. There will be rapid economic growth. The GDP, the gross domestic product, as we mentioned in last lecture, gross domestic product, okay, GDP, which measures economic development, will grow astronomically and rapidly. However, this growth will be driven by the use of fossil fuels, carbon fuels, all right? So pollution is going to be at the peak, all right? Carbon emission into the atmosphere is going to climax. That's what we're saying here. And therefore, average global temperature will get to that highest possible level of 4.4 degrees Celsius, ladies and gentlemen. So this is going to be a situation of a hothouse world, okay? As I said in the last lecture, it will be difficult for us to stand under the sun when we get to this peak. But this is a possibility. It's a plausible future we are looking at. It's a plausible future we are looking at. So, ladies and gentlemen, this is just a refresher of the IPCC SSPs. We need to refresh because we are moving to this first step, which is to begin to build an IPCC scenario for our case company to learn how to build. Okay, so to learn how to build, here we just want to learn what the IFRS S2 is saying. Why are we creating scenarios, climate scenarios in the first place? We need to develop and prepare climate scenarios because IFRS S2, which has become mandatory in many jurisdictions. All right, in Europe, it is mandatory. In some jurisdictions, for example, in Nigeria, it's going to be mandatory in 2026. Yes, in 2026, it's going to be mandatory. In Africa, most countries in Africa are adopting IFRS S2, and it's going to be mandatory for all publicly listed companies that sell their shares publicly on the public stock market. All right, it's mandatory. Now, in the UK is also considering making IFRS S2 mandatory. Okay, so it's becoming very mandatory in several jurisdictions. Okay, so what does IFRS S2 say about climate scenario development or creation? All right, what IFRS S2 says is that every entity that is reporting under IFRS S2 has to build a climate scenario that will be used to demonstrate the entity's resilience towards changing climatic situations or circumstances. That's what IFRS S2 says. So your climate scenario will be one of the ways to demonstrate that your company is actually building and accumulating resilience to face the different climatic futures, the plausible climate futures that we have just refreshed about in just few minutes ago. All right, when we're talking about the SSPs, that is the shared social economic pathways. All right, you are looking at various possible plausible futures, how the world is going to be when the climate or when the global warming is 1.5 degrees. How will the world be? How will you respond? Will your product still be in demand? What will your company be doing? Will your factory still be in production? And what about if the global temperature jumps to 2.7 degrees Celsius? What will happen to your business? Will your company still be in existence? Will that factory still be safe for workers to work in without going aflame, blowing into flames of fire? So that is the kind of resilience that IFRS S2 says that you should use climate scenario. You should build a climate scenario for your company to as a way to demonstrate that climate resilience. Okay, so that is the requirement number one in IFRS S2. Another requirement that IFRS S2 says is that you should disclose the scenarios, all right, using physical and transition risk. Okay, that you should be able to use that scenario to demonstrate how your entity is prepared to tackle the problems that will be brought against your business operations, your company strategy by physical and transition climate risk. Okay, we have discussed all of that. You know what physical climate risk is, you know what transition climate risk is. So you're going to see that what will be modeling in our climate scenario model. You'll be modeling physical risk and transition risk, and you will be quantifying the impact of transition risk and physical risk on your corporation, on your business. All right, so this is in line with the IFRS S2 requirements. And then another thing IFRS S2 says is that you should provide and disclose the key assumptions that you have used or you have made about your climate scenario you have developed. So, ladies and gentlemen, I am going to teach you how to comply with this requirement of IFRS S2, which is to disclose the scenario, the assumptions, beg your pardon, the assumptions that will be guiding the scenario, the climate scenario that we are going to build and prepare here. So IFRS S2 says that you should not just build a scenario, you should demonstrate or present the assumptions, because every climate scenario is based on key operating assumptions. So what are those assumptions? That you must provide a full disclosure of these assumptions. That's what IFRS S2 is saying. And then finally, IFRS S2 says that you should be able to tailor this scenario. You should adopt a publicly published and authoritative scenario like we are adopting IPCC. However, you should be able to tailor this scenario to your organizations to demonstrate and show your organizational exposure. And this tailoring should be based on your company's skills and resources. That's what IFRS S2 is saying. Okay, so yes, you are allowed to adopt a publicly published scenario, climate scenario, like we are adopting in this training, in this course, which is IPCC. All right, from United Nations organization, right? We are adopting IPCC.